Now you're welcome along. So All-Ireland hurling semi-final weekend is upon us. Dublin Cork obviously on Saturday, and then we have once again Kilkenny Tipperary on Sunday. So we're going to take a little walk down memory lane of, I think, the rivalry of this century, Kilkenny Tipperary in hurling, you'd have to say. Amazing really, because you know they did not play for such a long time very often, and then from 2009 on, boom, just became the game people were counting down to. So we had the 2009 final, Kilkenny. We had 2010, Kilkenny going for 5 in a row, and Tipperary win and win well. We have 11 where Kilkenny bounced back. We have 12, the semi-final. That's where the four lads are marking themselves in the corner, and Kilkenny win that one. We have 2013 at Nolan Park. 2014, another All-Ireland final, the replay. Kilkenny win ultimately, but that drawn game is probably forgotten as a classic. You have 16 where Tipperary go again, so amazing kind of rivalry. Eoin Kelly is going to join us. Played with Tip from 2000 to 2014. 5 Munster titles, 2 National Leagues, 6 All-Stars, 2 All-Irelands, needs no introduction. And then Eddie Brennan, of course, a regular on the show, 2000 to 2011. 8 All-Irelands, 10 Leinsters, 4 All-Stars. Also needs no introduction. So we're going to talk to the lads in just a moment. I do want to mention you have a chance to win a €500 One4All Voucher. Basically, we are asking listeners for feedback on the show. Be kind, for God's sake. But we're surveying listeners to get their thoughts on the show. And so if you want to do the survey and be in with a chance of winning a €500 One4All Voucher, then all you need to do is go to mypodcastfeedback.com, and then at the appropriate place, enter GAA, and you'll see all that you have to do. Doesn't take very, very long, by the way. Just say, brilliant, done, and you're in with a chance to win a €500 One4All Voucher. As ever, our GAA coverage is with thanks to AIB at the heart of Gaelic games across club and county, and in 25... they're celebrating a decade now, sponsoring the All-Ireland Senior Football Championships, which, this year better than ever. So AIB more excited than ever to bring fans closer to the action. You can check out #TheToughest for more. So let's get into it then. We were joined by Eddie Brennan and Eoin Kelly to talk Tipperary Kilkenny, the glory years. Do you know, it's funny, we had an email in the other week because there was a debate which broke out, not one we're proud of, but it broke out nonetheless. Ireland's most hated county. And the usual suspects were being talked about. And then we had an email in from a hurling person. And they were like, it's actually Tipperary. And the argument was, Tipperary basically have a border with almost every single rival in the country, and they all hate each other. You know, they're proper rivalries. So actually, Tipperary are sort of like the England of the hurling world.
I think it's 9 counties that border Tipperary, Joe, or something like that. Am I right? Because I remember being in the dressing room, actually, and when we play Offaly, you'd see John Carroll have fire in his eyes because he's from Rossgrey, so he's on the border. When you'd play Limerick, then the West Tipperary guys would have fire in their eyes. And when you'd play Kilkenny, then, as is coming on Sunday, a few of us...
East boys, West boys.
Yeah,
I think I remember we were the same, where there's obviously parts of Kilkenny from Urlingford all the way down as far as kind of Carrigan-Shore, that side. It nestles against Tipperary the whole way down. And I remember different matches. I remember Willie Dwyer saying it one year to us, he said, I know I've often heard the lads talking about Tip and the rivalry there, but he said, we have lads down below us and Waterford, so I suppose it's where you're from. And then you had the Glenmore side of the county where went to school in Wexford as well. So I suppose it's just the over and back of geography, and it adds to it.
Yeah.
So it's definitely the same as Tipperary and Waterford. The caricature would be hopping now in a Tipperary Waterford game beyond as well. So it's great.
And you driving through the middle of it.
Exactly, 100%.
The mad thing about this rivalry is I was just watching a clip of Brian Cody, and they were asking him about the rivalry with Tip, and he was like, yeah. You know, growing up they had the better of us, but then I never actually played against Tipperary in a championship match, which is, you know, a mad thought, really. So Brian Cody never got to play Tipperary in a championship match. So it was like this big gap from kind of late 60s to 91, then another big gap to kind of 02 territory, and then 09 The All-Ireland final of '09. This thing kicks off and we have, like, it's kind of crazy. '09 to '13, and that's not the end of it, it keeps going. But even '09 to '13, 3 All-Ireland finals, 1 All-Ireland semi-final, 2 National League finals, and that's not to mention 14 and 16 in other years. So it kind of went from famine to feast, Eddie.
Yeah, it did. And, I suppose it's, I spoke about it being a kind of a grudge match, but you have to drill down into that because it's a little bit more. I mean, it's obviously neighbourly rivalry, no more than any part of the country where you are on a border or even club. You don't like losing to each other. And ultimately, I think at the back of all of that, there's a massive respect because too many times you've been hurt by the opposition and there's been that over and back, and you can never, ever take each other for granted. And, even during my time and Owen's time, I suppose we would have clashed a lot, even in the league and different things. And occasionally, one got the better of the other. But for me, it was always a match you look forward to. You looked for in the calendar in the league or the championship because it was a great occasion to be part of. And I think, I would have been growing up and heard lots about the rivalry back early doors and back in my father's generation and before that. And I think it's fair to say that of that rivalry, Tip had a healthy level of consistency, and that they were always seemed to be able for Kilkenny back through that time. So that adds spice to it, and you'd often hear them talk about that. But like I said there, it's teed up nicely for this match. I think it's going to bring the best out of the two of them. It's kind of, there's an All-Ireland semi-final at stake, and there's a place in the big day. But it kind of takes on a life of its own in that it's bragging rights, no matter what way you look at it. And again, myself and Owen, we're not too far over the road from each other where we both live. And I'm involved with the club team in Tipperary there at the moment. But I think at the back of it all too, when the dust settles and there's obviously that slagging and the bragging rights, there's massive respect too, and there's great people both sides of it. And I've seen that. Again, hurling people are hurling people at the heart of it all. But like you said there, it's the winter side of it, and you don't want to be on the wrong side of it for the winter and have to listen to the slagging and the crack.
Yeah.
Interesting, Joe, to just hear you giving the history on Tip and Kilkenny. And I suppose you say Brian Cody said he never played against Tipperary in the championship, but I would have grew up on the stories, listened to my dad, and showed a couple of neighbours a call in and talking about Tip Kilkenny, and it was kind of talked about back in the 60s, and I wouldn't know much about it, that Tipperary had the men, Kilkenny had the hurlers. That's what they kind of said. So I'd say Brian Cody, when he got involved, I'd say he went about changing that. I'd say that's where the intensity and the physicality came from. And look, you have to win that battle. And Eddie, you know all about that. That's the first battle that you have to win before you go play hurling. And I'm sure it'll be, no doubt, it'll be the exact same at the weekend.
Yeah. Any stories or memories of how the border aspect would kind of interact around these games? Would you come across a Tip flag a little into enemy territory? Any of this kind of crack going on?
Oh, you would, yeah. Well, I was saying to Eddie off air there, 1991, I suppose, was the All-Ireland that I remember. And Tip won that game. And I actually remember, I suppose, John Power. Being shouldered into the wire, actually. I don't know, was it Colin Bonner?
Aidan Ryan.
Aidan Ryan, correct. And John came out with kind of, his hands were cut, and it was kind of nearly a statement from Tipperary that day. So that kind of sticks in your mind. But the banter then to Tip won, so I'm sure then it was the bragging rights were with Tip for that year. And they didn't meet then again, we're talking until 11 years later. And obviously then Kilkenny were a different animal then under Brian Cody. So you'd go to All-Ireland semi-final, Tip were All-Ireland champions. Kilkenny had been champions the year before, Eddie's first All-Ireland, I think, wasn't it? And that game was kind of nearly built up as the All-Ireland final that year. It was the two champions each year facing off, and then you had to return to DJ Carey for that game. So that brought that hype, and that game we think could have went anyway, but
very much so.
And then once Kilkenny won that, then that kind of kicked on that golden era for Kilkenny, and it's amazing. That was probably Brian Cody's. He was probably a couple of seasons into his management career then, and maybe if Tip had to win that, Brian mightn't have went on to become the Kilkenny and stayed as Kilkenny manager. Sometimes results like that can change careers for management, backroom team, and that. But the slagging was and the bragging rights were with Kilkenny then for a long time after that.
Eddie, you know the way you hated Cork and they hated you?
I think it was just they hated us, Joe.
Fair enough. What's the dynamic with Tipperary? The players now.
Actually, like I said there at the start, Joe, and it's one of, like, it's everything, right? But at the back of it all, there's respect, and that respect for me is born out of the fact that it's never a given. You know, you might know that, okay, we're strong at the moment, and we should. You know, I'm talking about at that time, we'd have felt, okay, 06, 07. You know, there was a change in the guard, I think, for Tipperary, and that they were going through a little bit of a change, and then Liam Sheedy came in. So, but I think it was always that you knew that there was never anything that you could take for granted. And I think even as players and even the build-up, it would bring another 5-6% out of you, because it was just a match that you know, you wanted to win. And other matches are the same. Like, the different times we were playing, you know, you found a reason. I think as players, you have to find that edge. Like, but you know, even for Eoin there, like, I was gone out with Kieran's and Eoin was in Kieran's. Like, and you know, the irony of it is, you know, he's hurling with Jackie and Tommy, and he ends up marking Jackie then a couple of years later. Like, and that's how close it is. And yes, there's an awful lot of people, you know, from even you go up Urlingford, Gortnahoe, Killinall, even Kilmanagh, my own parish, Tullaroan. There's marriages in, over and back across the border. Like, it's just there's people related. And like I said there's loads of slagging, there's loads of sneering, which is what makes it what it is. But there's no doubt about it, Joe, and you can, you know, we can dress it up whatever way we like. Everything is grand afterwards, and in the passing of time, it settles down a little bit. But you just do not like losing to each other. It's as simple as that. And I think that's what's building this up so nicely for this occasion. Yeah,
but that seems a little bit different to the Cork relationship then.
Probably is, yeah, because we're, you know, if Cork win something, we don't have to listen to them for the winter, I suppose, really is the point, you know, or whatever. Like, that's just the nature of the beast. But when Cork wins something, I'm sure all the guys down around, you know, that part of Ballyporeen, down that side of Tipperary will know all about it. And that's, I suppose, that's just geography, and that's just the way it is. And like I said there, it makes it what it is. It creates and makes the GAA what it is. And the more than you drill down into the clubs all have their history with their neighbours.
Well, we won't go through every minute of every game, obviously, but just to jog memories a little bit, 2009 is that All-Ireland final where Eoin and Lark Corbett have been the kids in 2001, and then there's been a long time away, and now All-Ireland final as Tipperary kind of come good again. Meanwhile, Kilkenny are going for 4 in a row, and they've obviously beaten Cork 06, Limerick 07, destroyed Waterford 08, and there's like they're kind of red hot favourites. And we get this great final. I mean, it's a real signal that Tip are here, and we're about to have the rivalry that we subsequently had. Was there any bit of fear, Eoin, amongst Tipperary going into that All-Ireland final, for, you know, hot on the heels of what they did to Waterford the year before? Like, there must have been a degree of trepidation, or no?
No, it's interesting you say that, because I think a lot of people forget the 2009 league final in thirds. That was an amazing game. And Eddie is there. And I remember, Eddie, you knocked over a point from 100 yards, I'd say, and there was 81 minutes of the clock in injury time. And like, that's after hopping off lads for 80 minutes, hook and block and tie. Like, that was a ferocious game. Like, Brian Hogan went off with a dislocated shoulder. Seamus Callum hit him a fair shot. I remember Micheál Webster jostling James Ryle out over the sideline. We picked up the ball, goal. That game was nearly as good as any of those All-Irelands, and it kind of goes under the radar.
Right, okay.
So
yeah, that was, I'd class that as one of the greatest matches to be involved in, you know, ironically enough. And what Eoin said there, like, strangely enough, right, that was the time the yellow card meant you had to go off. So you had Martin Comerford entered the fray off the sideline. He never even got to touch the ball himself. And Declan Fanning got yellows. Henry went off with a yellow. Mick Kavanagh went off with a yellow. We were missing Noel Hickey. We were missing Derek Ling, Michael Fenley. And I think at the time then, Paddy, Brendan, Noel were all after arriving on to the Tipperary setting up. And it just, I think, preceding that, down in the Nolan Park, we had a big win. And I think that match, rolling into that match, and I remember Brian Cody building it up, and he, you know, very clearly knocked it out of our heads. Lads, don't be fooled by the match in the park, that this is going to be a different animal. And I'd say Liam probably treated it as the same. This was a real line in the sand for Liam Sheedy and your bunch.
He did. So to answer your question, Joe, that 2009 league final gave Tipperary massive confidence to say that we could match the intensity matched the intensity right up until the 80th minute, like, so that was extra time. But another game for us that gave us the injection that, you know what, we can compete here was the year before, 2008, beating Kilkenny in the league semi-final in Nolan Park. I think we finished 115 to 110. And we went on to win the league that year, which put a trophy on the table, and actually the Munster final. So there were small little wins that gave us the belief and the confidence that we could match Kilkenny's intensity, because ultimately that's what you want. You don't want that for 40 minutes or 50 minutes. And that's probably what some of the teams were doing. And then in the last 20, they were being blown away. So that's where that came from, Joe. So it was small little wins and just getting that little bit further each year. Now, it all goes back to probably the winter time of 2007 as well, when Liam Sheedy came in. It was just shoulders to the wheel, hard work, the hard slog was done. And I'd say we probably hadn't went about that kind of routine for a couple of seasons, because we had to change a manager every two seasons. Now, I know Liam was obviously fresh in his first year, but he went about it a different way. And like, there's no substitute to having that hard work done. Like, and everybody was put through. There was no allowances made. So I think that also brings that confidence as well, that you can go for whatever amount of minutes the game is going to last.
Yeah. Well, people remember that 2009 final because it's a great game. There's the penalties, or the penalty rather, Shefflin's penalty, which, controversial, and Kilkenny get over the line. They win by 5. But like, already, I remembered, like, 2010 just felt like a countdown to, can these two go at it again?
Yeah.
And there was so on the one hand with 2010, you have a sense of Tipperary are coming, and like that 2009 final can only stand to them. And then on the other hand, Eddie, you guys are going for 5 in a row, which is a whole other different kind of kettle of fish.
Yeah, it has just looked different places, but I think the point being, and I think, Brian Cody endured this at the start of his tenure. Like, Kilkenny were coming off a defeat in 98. His first year in, they were beaten by Cork 12 points, 13 in All-Ireland final in 99. And I think often, you get there and you fall short, and the sooner you can get back to that position, the sooner you can kind of right that wrong. And that's the fuel that drives any team. And like, again, both of us have experienced that and know what that's like. And it brings the best out of you, brings more out of you, or else you fade away. It's as simple as that. And that's what happens with it. Like, and the more than we look at this current Limerick team, they enjoyed that period of supremacy that they had for the last couple of seasons. And the same, like, Tip came along and toppled those in 2010. And I remember my father talking to me kind of a few days afterwards, and he said, it's gas. He said, I went back, he said, and kind of he looked at 2009 All-Ireland final, and he said Tipperary actually didn't have to change a whole lot, because he said they didn't convert the chances. Like, PJ Ryan got man of the match in 2009. I think he brought off 4 certain goal saves, one even that Owen kind of lost his foot, and that I definitely closed my eyes and was waiting for it to hit the net. And PJ just had that day of days for us. He got man of the match. And the father was kind of the question, says, wonder, did we ever ask why did their goalie get man of the match? So the difference was then, and I kind of heard this afterwards, that Tip really put an emphasis on quality of touch. And you look at then 10, when the chances came, the conversion was there. Like, there wasn't the same kind of, and I suppose that's what it's about. So
just even on,
there was no magic in how Tip approached that All-Ireland in 2010. It was just going, look, lads, we are plenty good enough. We just have to convert those chances when they come our way.
Just even on that, Eddie, it's interesting you said that. You kind of took the words out of my mouth there, and I was going to say that we hit our purple patch after half time, and we had the opportunity to convert and score 2-6, and I think we put a point on the board. Kilkenny hit their purple patch probably 15, 12, 10 minutes to go, got created score chance about 2-5, 2-6, and nailed 2-5, 2-6. So that was the difference that day. Like, you can talk about the penalty, but no, not for me. I think Eddie just summed it up there. Your dad actually looking back on the 2009 final, we got the chances that day, didn't convert them, and the year after we did convert the goal chances that we got. So, like, that's what it is. And maybe that was down to an experience of the know-how to finish out an All-Ireland final, whereas Kilkenny had that in abundance. But we learned fairly quickly after that game.
Yeah, and it's even interesting on that. In the build-up to 2011 final, we never done a whole lot of video analysis, or really stats weren't fashionable then in our setup anyway. But I remember in the run-up to the 11 All-Ireland, we were in Carton House on a training weekend, And Martin Fogarty, in the 09 All Ireland, he said, how many second half puck outs before we won one, either clean or on the break? And we were all kind of going, Jesus, 2011, where's he going with this? And he said, the 13th puck out in the second half. So he said, our own 13th puck out in that All Ireland was the first time we won a possession on a break. So the message was simple. He said, lads, we were cleaned out in terms of work rate. They cleaned us out with work rate, he said. And it was just that you were lucky, he said, that, you know, that the finish wasn't there, because he said we could have been pulverised after 15 minutes of that second half.
Yeah. I guess the other thing people remember about 2010, Eddie, is the injuries to Shefflin in particular, Tennyson as well. Both cruciates, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's amazing, really. But I remember listening to the radio, like in advance of that final, and it was described like Lazarus when he walks out the tunnel, because there's about 10,000 at this open training session. And I don't know if this tallies with memory, and I don't want to hear it's not true, but it's almost like Shefflin comes out last and the whole place just erupts. But obviously it backfires. He only plays for 12 minutes of the final.
Yeah, well, the story was that it was actually, I think Canis Hickey ran out just ahead of him, or ran out past him as he was going out. And I think the boys were saying that Canis got the round of applause going onto the pitch. But why are they clapping me on? I think Char, a few of the lads were slagging him. But yeah, look, it grew. We heard stories of, you know, there's obviously that famed failure in Kerry in the 5 in a row and the Seamus Derby thing. And we used to always have kind of open training sessions, and there was a lot of guys just to come over and watch the internal matches. And it wasn't that there was a big crowd there, but the crowds were growing, and through 08 and into 09. And then obviously 10, sure, look, there's obviously a piece of history on offer. And the crowds just gathered. And I suppose the injuries is one thing, but I suppose we've seen in later years, like Brian shut that down, and a lot of lads were grumbling about it. But I suppose if he was back again, he may have done that. But he probably didn't want to be getting tetchy around it and just, we keep doing the same thing. But I think that night in particular was the one that probably the whole thing, you know, it just went out, it spiraled out of control, if you like. And it was a place that, you know, we I won't say we leaned on it or we got distracted by it. We didn't. We had become somewhat conditioned to that. We were okay with that. But I think it was ultimately that it was the questions around it. It was probably, you know, Owen knows this from his time, that when you were going well and you roll into an All-Ireland or Munster final, Munster campaigns, whatever it is, everything has to be nice and smooth, right? You don't generally have big injuries, and everything is grand. It tips along. But if you have distractions or little things like that, I mean, so I suppose the question was, we were all going, well, how's Henry? How's Tenno? You know, it became a little sideshow subconsciously. And all it does is it can just take your focus a little bit. And I can see myself, just the little things that they all add up. I think when you lose, it's not one thing. You can see lots of small things, and they just add up, and it just contributes on the day. But the reality was, we weren't as driven as Tipperary, and yet, ironically, we probably performed equally as good as Tip on the day. Only that Tipperary, when the chances presented, you know, they converted, and Lara had that incredible day where I think he only was in possession of the ball for maybe 10 or 11 seconds and rattles off 3 goals.
Yeah. So you can remember that night. That's interesting. So, like, just huge crowds.
Yeah.
Probably a few Tip players in the crowd having a look on.
No, I actually don't think so. But on the flip side of that, then we were probably hearing what was going on. But to be honest with you, it wasn't our focus that Kilkenny had the injuries. Like, I think for us, it was redemption from the year before, because we knew we had played well. I got the chances, not taking them. Like, and we were so well prepared for that 2010 final that Eamon O'Shea even had spoken to us and said, look, when Henry goes down injured, he was going to come in and he was going to organise our backline again and keep them focused. So when the player of a calibre of Henry goes off, you can have guys that their mindset goes, oh, lovely, he's gone now. This is grand. Do you know? Because, like, I think Kilkenny went in maybe a point down at halftime that day. So, you know, we just had everything covered off. And I think even the management team, Liam Sheedy, they learned an awful lot from the year before. So, you know, Declan Fannin, I suppose, the year before was under pressure maybe in the last 8 or 10 minutes. So he came off in the 10 final with about 8 or 10 minutes to go, and David Young came on and just brought that freshness. So even from bringing substitutions onto the pitch at the right time in the right places. I think Liam Sheedy learned an awful lot there. So I think we were just working away quietly, really focused on the job at hand. And I think Eddie mentioned it there. One of our big aims was to attack Kilkenny, because the narrative was out there. Oh, look, stay with Kilkenny, and maybe you'll catch them in the last 4 or 5 minutes. And our motto was to attack them from the off. And I think we went 1-4 to a point ahead. So we probably got Kilkenny chasing the game.
Yeah.
Then when the injuries happened for Kilkenny, it wasn't a case of heads saying, lovely, we've this one now, or we were in a comfortable place now. It was back to focus. So our mindset was absolutely excellent. And I think Eddie said, distraction.
I think even that, Eoin, am I right in saying, because I remember I had a stinker and I remember trying to rise a ball. I think we hit the posts to go a point up in the second half.
Could have had.
And I remember it broke down to me and I couldn't rise it. And I remember Tip cleared it, and that was it. Just you kicked for home then and got the point or two, and then the few goals, just the floodgates opened. Then that's
you mentioned Lara. Lara, I think, had 5 plays that day, and he scored a hat trick. And the year before, he's All-Ireland final the year before in 09.
He ran amok, yeah.
He had 18 plays.
Was it?
He had 18 plays, got
points,
four from play, and he got a score underneath the Hogan stand, or the Cusack stand. Picked it up in the half back line, ran 25, 35, 40 yards and clipped it over. So it's funny, if you ask Lara which game did you perform better in, he'd probably say 09, but he crucially got the hat-trick in the 10 final.
Yeah. Shefflin, in his book, Eddie, talked about being on the bed, consoled by his wife, almost tears in fact, because just the pressure of the whole thing had got to him. Do you remember feeling this 5 in a row pressure heat on you in a big way, or were you even aware that was going on with players like Shefflin?
No, but you're kind of aware of what's going on, and again, that probably created, like I said, that these small little stories and small little chats. We had the boys were down with Ger Hartman, and I think, if I recall right, I think John Tennyson was up in Galway at the races when he got a phone call that Henry was going to Ger Hartman and Ger Hartman was going to work with him and see. And so Tenno had to kind of by association or default had to go down and nearly drown in the pool in UL, and there was that going on. So we were all kind of you were looking at that going on, and you're aware of that. And then I remember even we played, I think it was that same evening, and it was something that I don't know, I suppose I haven't really spoke about much, but I remember they played the match and they marked each other in an internal match, and we used to do these 3-12s or whatever it was, and the first 12, Tenno and Henry go and mark each other, and they got through it. There was a couple of times that both of them went up for a high ball and landed, and I just happened to be floating in at the back of the scrum when we were coming in to chat after the first water break, we'll say, and Robbie Lodge was checking in with the two boys, and I remember Henry saying, kind of going, is that okay? We have enough done now, kind of as much to say, I don't want to tempt fate. And Robbie Lodge said, no, God, no, lads, you may stay going. If it goes, it goes. And I took that away with me. It was just kind of burnt into my head afterwards. I said, imagine saying that to somebody that's trying to build up their leg. And that's the way, that was the nature of it. As Robbie Lodge said, look, he was telling them the truth. But imagine saying to someone that had done their cruise ship in 07, had done it again, and was working away trying to get it. How you deal with that psychologically, for me, I was very, very fortunate, no big injuries. And I just went, wow, imagine saying that to a lad and he trying to get himself right. And it wasn't wrongness out of anyone. That was the reality of the situation. And I think John Tennyson, I think I heard Liam Sheedy saying to me that the Tip lads could hear John Tennyson's leg clicking right through that All-Ireland. He got through a full All-Ireland, 73 minutes with a fully gone cruise ship and stayed going. Just incredible stuff.
Yeah. Well, we have a listen to Eoin Kelly's speech. So here he is.
Reeling in the ears.
2010, Tipperary. They've beaten Kilkenny 4-17 to 118. They've stopped the 5 in a row. And obviously amazing moment in Eoin Kelly's life.
It's a great honour for me as a Tipperary man to accept the Liam County Cup on behalf of a massive, excellent Tipperary squad and the people of Tipperary. A long journey that probably started not this year, but I go back as far as 2008 when this squad got together. I'd like to think that we created our own identity. Our characters and our personalities came true, not only today, but in the last 3 years. All those things I've already mentioned: professionalism, honesty, organisation. The next man, what can any of us say, guys? He came in when the ship was sinking, but by God is this ship sailing today. All the way from Portroe, our Messiah, our leader, Liam Sheedy.
There we go. It's a little taster. Nicely done. Nicely done.
It sounded like I'm in the kitchen rattling that off there. So
And did you do a few practice runs in the kitchen, or what was the approach?
No, small few bullet points I remember, but it's amazing. I remember handing the speech, we'll say just a few bullet points, to Hot Pint. Was it the morning of the match, or could it even be in the last training session? And I had it in a little plastic cover. And I just said to him, look, if it's a wet day, I said, I don't want that getting smudged. I said, I'll need that. And I wasn't saying it that way, but like, yeah, as arrogant, but it was probably just the belief that we had going into that final, that we could win it, like, and that was it. Look, when you're the captain then on All Ireland final day, it's great. Like, you get to celebrate with the lads for maybe only 15 or 20 seconds afterwards, and then you have a job to do, you know. And I think you're just in that headspace where you're focused again, just get this out of the way. So don't think you can say that you're enjoying it, but you're probably not, because you know you have to deliver a captain's winning speech. And
It sounds like you're at a wedding and you have to make a speech and it's in the back of your mind all day.
Yeah, it's amazing. But like, I could imagine the amount of players that had speeches ready for All Ireland final day and never got to give them. So it can be a horrible feeling as well. And look, I experienced the opposite side of it the year after then, when I was captain as well in 11, and we were beaten. And it's funny, I actually wasn't prepared for that at all. Like, so you'd be wondering then, were you as focused the year after as you were that year? But look, I think for me, that All Ireland final was relief. So I'm 28 years of age. I'm getting towards the end of my career. I've won All Ireland Medal 1 in 2001. Had a lot of barren years. So you're actually wondering, will you ever get there again? So that was my overriding emotion after that. It was relief, if I'm being honest.
I can imagine. Well, it just changes your career. There's such a difference between winning one at the start and then nothing again, or a two-time All-Ireland winner. Big difference. Yeah,
it does. And look, when you're winning at 19, like, you don't really understand what's involved. You're just one of the young fellas in the dressing room listening to everything that's going on. Then when you get towards the end of the career, you feel you're one of the leaders in the dressing room and that you're driving this. And for us then, we had the influx of the younger players and the energy that they gave us. And like, I suppose, you know, we embraced those younger players. That's what we done back in 08, 9, 10, the Noel McGrath, Shane McCandless, Paddy Mars, Brendan Mars. We embraced all those guys, and we brought them along. And I think that's even a legacy you'd hope that you left with those, that, okay, they were jostling for your jersey and you're jostling to keep them out. But ultimately, that's what brought the standards and raised the standards. And, you know, to this day, that 2010 team, even once a year, we go away some weekend in November just to get together and meet up. So that's the bond that we created even through Liam Sheedy's era, 08, 9, 10. We only won one All Ireland, but so we created an everlasting bond there, and it continues to this day. Like,
yeah, nice.
Lovely to say.
Nice, yeah. 2011 then the trilogy, Kilkenny 217, Tipperary 116, so that's a 4-point win. Eddie Brennan very memorably sets up an amazing Richie Hogan goal. Here's the commentary of it.
Nothing hurried at all, everything's measured, and Colin Fennelly races forward, slips a little hand pass into a determined Eddie Brennan. Off he goes, like he's running in Shelburne Park. Hand pass across to Hogan. What a goal! That is quite superb. That's hurling for you. Hurling of the very best. And it's a second Kilkenny goal. It's a goal for Richie Hogan.
An amazing goal. So, Eddie, I'm presuming the pain of 10, you guys are fairly possessed into this season?
Yeah, I can distinctly remember the warm-up area in 2010. We all went in and assembled there afterwards, and I remember Brian saying it. He said, you know, and one thing Brian was always very good at was kind of accepting defeat, you know, and he wouldn't sugarcoat it. He just said to us, we weren't good enough today, lads. We weren't good enough. But by God, we'll be back here next year. He said, and just remember this. He said, do not forget this, he said. And he said, this is our motivation. And he was very singular with that stuff as well. And he was very good at parking up. even success, as much as failure was obviously the key one, because that's where you learn the most from. The successes were grand, and we were fortunate with that. But I think that was the one thing that probably sustained Brian, was that he was very much able to separate the year previous, and we move on and make those decisions that were best for the team. And look, it was something that drove us for the year, because you wanted to get back to those days. And I remember, I think even in 05, we were one eye on Cork and wanted to get back at Cork for 04, and Galway caught us in the semi-final. So, that left you, we had that memory to draw on too. And I remember even the Kilkenny people at the time in 05 had said, I think the headline was "Thanks for the memories, lads." And so there's lots of things like that. But I think all these things are kind of, and no one probably shares that, the reference points, and a reference point, be it positive or negative, and particularly the negative ones, are the ones that really motivate you and fill up the motivation that you need to go forward into that year. And for me, it was a year that I spent most of the year sitting on the sideline, and luckily enough, I got drafted back in for the final that year. And I think it was about the only time I was ever handed a man marking job in an All-Ireland final. I was told I had to man mark Paddy Maher, and he wasn't to clear the ball. And I was like, going, Jesus, okay, I'll take that. Well, I didn't care. If he had to have said he wanted me to play number 2, so be it. I think that's the mindset. And it was a different challenge. We felt that Paddy was central to setting up things and delivering ball to the lads inside, and Brian felt that we had to cut out that source. And I think I definitely missed one where he got it to Noel underneath the Hogan stand, and Noel McGrath threw over a point, and I was kind of vexed with myself for that. So that was the way it was. And then luckily the ball opened up, and much and all, as you've seen it afterwards, and you'd love to have maybe been able to have a bit of space and have a cut for a goal from there. It was more satisfying to get rid of it and let someone else do the rest of it, because I was running out of steam at that stage, and I was glad to see Richie Hogan peeling off to one side.
Yeah, it was an amazing kind of goal. One of the things to be thrown a tip, Owen, is they don't follow up an All-Ireland win with another one the following year. Did big difference between 11 and 10, or just one of those things?
Well, a massive difference. We didn't win the All-Ireland, and that was the thing that we couldn't follow up. But I suppose, look, you take small positives from back then. Like, we would have been probably the first team that won a Munster final after winning an All-Ireland in a long, long time.
Right.
Yeah.
So Tip won the All-Ireland in 91, didn't win the Munster in 92, won the All-Ireland in 89, didn't win the Munster in 1990, won the All-Ireland in 01, didn't win the Munster final in 02. So we had a change of management as well. Declan Ryan came in as manager, so like Declan, when he was in his managerial term with Tip, won back-to-back Munster finals as well. So, look, but ultimately in the Kilkennys and the Tipperary counties, like, an All-Ireland is what you're craving each year. And when you don't win that, they look at it maybe as a disappointing year. But I think with the game being so competitive even nowadays, like, I don't think you can look at it like that. Like, teams have to make progression in certain ways. But look, it was disappointing, Joe, because the hardest thing is to get back to an All-Ireland final. And we actually were on fire in Munster, scoring goals regularly, 4, 5, 6, 7 goals in the Munster final. Dublin then came tactically with us. John McCaffrey that day, I think, actually in the semi-final was midfield, but he was a 7th defender when Dublin were defending, and he was actually nearly a 7th attacker when they were going forward. And Dublin actually, they were coming good around then.
I think was it 10? 10 Waterford. It was 09 then. Was it they nearly got you? They were very close one year.
That was the 11 All-Ireland semi-final.
11 semi-final, yeah, they were very close.
4 points in it, yeah. 119 to 18 it finished. But tactically they were very good. And I suppose how good we were in Munster made the Dublins under Anthony Daly and Kilkenny stand back and say, right, this is where they need to be shut down. And like that day, the All-Ireland final 11, we went out, and I won't say we were spooked, but each Kilkenny defender had a man marking job to do. I know Nolan
never really done,
yeah. So we kind of, Kilkenny defenders were in a huddle when we went in, and next thing, bang, Noel Hickey was gone to me, Jackie was gone to Lar. And I suppose in hindsight now, it would have been lovely. Like, Brian Hogan probably could have ended up him corner back, and maybe Tommy could have ended up full back. If you had your time back,
you could manipulate them. Yeah.
Yes, But so we were chasing that game from the off. It was 5 points to no score. We hadn't even got a score, and then I think we might have got a free and got back into it. We probably got it back to a 4-point game. And even think when Eddie went through and Richie scored that, there were 5
it was close still.
Yeah. So we were always chasing it. That was the team. And like probably wasn't one of the better All-Ireland finals, hurling wise, but it was just Kilkenny's hunger. That was the thing. And just I think physicality that day. I remember Colin Fennelly coming forward, back hooking Lara, and little things like that stick in your mind.
It never really opened up. I think it was the way we probably set up was that we weren't going to let the match open up. It just, you didn't want it to kind of open up because you knew that would arguably suit Tipperary, coming down the straight. So it was just making sure that everyone stayed on point and got their job done. And it was very much a collective focus like that.
Yeah. I never asked you before, Eddie. Did you just decided I'm done then, did you? Because you'd spent a good chunk of the year on the bench, or was it more of a thanks for your service?
I don't know. I suppose, Joe, it was the first lad, Harry, had been born the week into the All-Ireland, and it was obviously a special time. And I suppose you just maybe over the winter and you just kind of said, look, I always wanted to go back to my own club in good health and give them a couple of good years. And I just felt at that stage, I think it was maybe my father and uncle and more around me were probably more disappointed because you were on the brink of maybe getting the ninth, and it was never really about the numbers for me. It was about enjoyment, and I suppose you were looking at it and saying, look, there was good competition. It wasn't that I was afraid of that competition either. I just kind of wanted, I suppose life had changed a tiny bit and I wanted to kind of a different challenge. I ended up hurling with my club until I was 42, and I just wanted that side of it. I wanted kind of the time. I remember, I think even during the summer of 11, I gave 3 or 4 weekends in Carton House, and you just kind of, I think there's a time in your life where you go, look, that was brilliant. It was all consuming. You loved it. Then the time it moves on from that, and life becomes a little bit different. And I remember very distinctly sitting in the RTE box, kind of doing the Sunday game at the time, watching the boys celebrating in 12 after beating Galway in the replay. And for about 5 or 6 seconds, you look down and you go, God, I'd love to be there. But it evaporated very quickly, and I was very at ease with the decision. And I think you're also looking at it too, and Owen probably knows this more than I do even, like, the body is just not able to recover as quick. I didn't have any injuries. Owen had a few injuries. The body just doesn't recover as quick. And you have to do an awful lot more when you get older. The brain, the hurling brain works as good as ever, and you'll see the game probably better than ever. But I think it's just that you're talking, inches and centimetres now, and young guys that have just no end to them, suddenly, they take it on. And I was happy enough too, like there was lots of young guys coming through in Kilkenny. We were good in that regard, and like I said, it wasn't that you were afraid of competition, but you knew that it was a bigger challenge, and you were 33 or whatever. So that was it really. But no regrets anyway, Joe. That's for sure.
You would have been looking on in 12 like the rest of us. Oh, and you were still there. The semi-final, like, it's funny, like these amazing matches, and you say to people, what do you remember of this extraordinary rivalry? And they'll talk about certain things. Everybody will mention Jackie Tyrrell, Pa Burke, Lara Corbett, Tommy Walsh. All Ireland semi-final, Kilkenny win it well, 424 to 115. And like trying to unravel what was happening during the game it just didn't make any sense. Someone wanted to mark someone, and someone didn't want to be marked by someone, but they were doing it anyway. And it's only afterwards when the 4 lads kind of explain it years later that you understand that basically, I mean, you can take it from different vantage points. But if you're Jackie Tyrrell, to simplify it, Jackie Tyrrell's there, and Pa Burke wants to mark me, Jackie Tyrrell, but I want to mark Lara Corbett. But then Tommy Welch is decided he's marking Pa Burke, so we're stuck together. And at one stage it's like the match is happening and these 4 like greats are over there in the corner playing with themselves, and this goes on for far too long. I mean,
and I think that episode that you spoke about was in the second half when the game was dead and buried. But in the first half, so Lara was being marked by Jackie, so I think Lara had it in his head that, right, he's man marked, so who's Kilkenny's next most influential defender? So he angled himself towards Tommy in his head to stop Tommy hurling, hitting ball, you know. And I suppose the probably thing at half time, Tipper were winning that game 1-10 to 1-9, which doesn't probably make sense. And throughout that, I think Pat Burke got a goal because the four lads were kind of tangled together. And I don't know, did Lara
broke in, yeah, and he got around Harrow.
Did someone spill a ball and next in for a goal?
Yeah.
But look, it was a wrong tactic as it worked out in the second half, right? But look, what happened probably in the weeks previous to that probably didn't help our preparation for that semi-final. And look, you can say, here you come now making your excuses. But I suppose 3 weeks before that semi-final, we would have went to Bear Island in West Cork. Probably thought maybe it was one of your weekend camps. As you know, Eddie, you'd go to Carton House, you'd go to Port Island. So we were met by Army Rangers once we got off the bus. And I suppose we done a 24 to 48 hours of absolute torture now. Archer, right? Now, look, I'm not sure where the management sure that this is what was coming, but this is what happened. And it was on the same weekend. That was a Friday and a Saturday. And it was on the same weekend that there was divisional finals actually played in Tipperary. And Eddie, you know about this. South final was on, the mid final, the West final, and the North final. So all the divisional finals could be on. Now they're big club games in the Tipperary hurling calendar. So a lot of guys picked up injuries throughout the weekend and throughout those divisional finals. Okay, Joe. So that's not an excuse. It was just probably wrong timing.
Yeah. Because
I remember we would have went to Carton House then. It was 2 weeks after that. So it would have been the week before we played Kilkenny. Because we stayed the Friday and the Saturday, and then the Sunday, a few guys were taking the option. Did they want to go in to see Cork and Galway? But one onlooker who was picking up a couple of us saw the Tipperary guys coming up with strapping everywhere, limping, lads nearly crawling up like. But a lot of guys were carrying injuries probably into that semi-final. But, you know, just I think when Kilkenny got on top in that second half, then I just think physically and probably more importantly mentally, it just wasn't there to meet the requirements. And I suppose, you know, you have those days when everything goes wrong. And I think that was a day when everything went absolutely wrong. You know, but look, there's learning in it. And, you know, even the management team would probably say they weren't sure what was going to confront us when we went to Bear Island for that weekend. Maybe they thought it might be only half of what we went through. But by God, lads, remember that weekend for the wrong reasons.
Right, okay. There's a documentary in that. Because I remember talking to Brendan Cummins a couple of years after that, and he was saying, you know, I'm on puckouts, right? I need to know what's going on. This was the first... You knew as much in the crowd as I did about what the hell was going on up there. No one told me what was happening.
Yeah, and look, as I said, funny thing that day was, I don't know, I just think we just weren't right. Just mentally weren't right in more ways than one. Like, and so when you're not 90% right going into a game,
it's a struggle. Yeah,
you're under pressure. It's a struggle. Like, but when you're maybe only at 45%, you have no chance. And then to be a point up at half time, then you know, when you're winning by a point, you're saying, right, what are we doing here? Things seem to be going okay. What's happening? So I think the thing just went to pot maybe when Kilkenny strolled into the league half time. And
I remember sitting behind the goal that Kilkenny played into in the first half. And I remember, I think Colin Fennelly missed a good goal chance, and then Henry came in and popped it off to Teach, and he got that goal, and it kind of gave us a bit of breathing space. But I remember at the time there was a lot of things going on all over the pitch. Even I remember, I think John O'Brien clashing with JJ. But in the second half, then I got a front seat view of the carry on with the four boys, like, and I just went, Jesus. I said, and part of it then is kind of going, geez, that's brilliant. They're just all taking each other out. But who did that suit? It suited us, because I would argue that Jackie was never going to hurl a whole lot of ball. His job was man marking. So in some ways, it took out two of Tip's more dangerous forwards, like definitely Lar. You know, for me, if Lar is parked on the edge of the square, you have a problem. You know, if he's close to goal and Tip are looking to put ball in there, or he's out the field, Murad looking for ball, but he had his crosshairs set on Tommy that day. And I'd have to say, like, I think I even commented, I never seen that like it in my life, because and you know, you're looking at it in the context of, right, what's achievable here, and you just went, okay, grand, it didn't work, now let's do something different. Imagine if you have, you know, suddenly take out the other tip forward, maybe spread them out a bit and park the two boys on the edge of the square. Now you have a different dynamic, because if the ball goes in there, well, something has to happen. Like, so, but yeah, look, it was a game, and I know I absolutely agree with Owen. Some days the arse just falls out of it, and there's nothing you can do, and it has probably happened long before it, and it just manifests itself in the worst possible place. And I think we've all experienced that, and it's horrible, but you just want to cut it out of your mind as quickly as possible and move on.
Owen, just to wrap up, you know, like, they just keep on coming, because, like, even before you go, there in 13, there is the qualifier in Nolan Park, which is, like, still it's just an extraordinary occasion, you know, to have you know, the All-Ireland finalists and semi-final the last number of years in Nolan Park, this do or die qualifier, evening sunshine, Nolan Park rammed, and then the following year there's the drawn All-Ireland final. A league final as well.
There's league finals as well.
In there, yeah. But then the drawn All-Ireland, which is a classic, like, gives 62 points combined across 70 minutes, which was a record at the time. And then it goes to a replay, and it's Cody's 10th, and it's Shefflin's 10th. So, and then you retire the end of that year in 14. So even, you know, after everything we've talked about, you still have the Nolan Park one and the All-Irelands of 14 as well.
You do, and look, you're still hanging on, and I suppose you're trying to just pick up another All-Ireland medal, like, and that's what you're trying to do, you know what I mean? You're trying to maybe, you know, bring a bit of experience, because I suppose I was on the bench for that 14 final. I got on for the last 5 minutes, right, the first day. But I remember being on the bench sitting beside Dara Egan, and after about 27 or 8 minutes, I just turned to him and I said, Dara, this is some game. I said, like, there hasn't been a wide in this. It was just bang, bang. And the noise levels, that 14 final for me now is right up there with one of the greatest games.
Yeah, it's a little bit. I think because it went to a draw, maybe it's a touch forgotten, but it's off the charts. Yeah.
And imagine this: like, you have Eoin Kelly and Henry Shefflin sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah. Can these lads give us 5 minutes after? Give us anything? No.
Yeah.
On the Zimmer frames.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. But we had 7 goal chances that day, and we took one. We finished scoring 128 to 322. But Larry, you mentioned Larry earlier on.
Did he hit the post with one that day?
He hit the top corner. The post,
I remember. I was right behind it, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to sail in." He
went to place it into the top corner.
Yeah.
He didn't just hit it. No, it would have been for me one of the best goals scored in an All-Ireland final, and it was that kind of game. And look, then sure, it ultimately came down to the Hawkeye, and it's gas. I'd say if I got €1 for every time someone said to me, "Why didn't you take that?" I don't think I'll be on this podcast with you today, but like, Bubbles was on form that day. He scored 5 from play, so you had a man that said, "Here, I'm taking that." You know, but I remember coming on, and I remember talking to Jackie Tyrrell when Bubbles was taking the free and saying, "Jackie, what's left in this?" Because, to be honest with you, I don't think it was a good sub coming on, because, you know, when you're used to starting, I didn't know what was left on the clock. He said, I think there's 3 or 4 minutes. So I was amazed then when the ball was popped out and Barry Kelly blew the final whistle and it was game over. But there's one question I'd love to meet Barry and ask him if Bubbles had to score.
Jesus,
I actually think he would have let it play happen, because it was such an even game and a score for score game. I'd say he would have let it play happen. Like, I don't even know what was on the clock that day of finish. Was it 71 minutes? Maybe there was 1 minute injury. I can't remember what went up on the board, but that game had everything: penalty misses, goal chances, points. That was one of the best.
But even too, I remember at the end of that, and there was kind of a lot of people grumbling, saying that the free wasn't the free, that Brian Hogan ran up the field and Stephen Pawley collided, and there was no big hit in it or anything like that. But ironically, you know, we were saying afterwards, well, thank God he did blow the free, and what happened, because I think Paddy Stapleton gathered possession, and Jason Ford was standing on his own out under the Cusack stand, and the next play was going to be to Jason Ford. So arguably, had it not been a free, and I remember even doing the Sunday game with Liam Sheedy, and he said, look, this is steel on steel. He said 2 big lads colliding. He said no free. But I remember seeing that afterwards, and someone saying to me, said, did you see where the ball went? and I think it possibly broke Paddy Stapleton, and you had Jason Ford hanging out loose. So, but I'd agree with Owen, one of the greatest. Like, it was up and down the field. Like, I'd never seen that like it. And I think even at the start of the match, I think myself and Liam Sheedy sat side by side in the Sunday game box and sang. We belted out the "They're on the V" and "Better Than Anyone" and kind of jostled each other and best love. Well, it was up and down. It was like it was such a roller coaster of a match.
Yeah. That's nice, by the way, that even in the midst of all that, Owen, you can ask Jackie how long's left and he gives you an answer. I thought he'd be like, fuck off.
And Jackie was civil back to you.
Yeah.
He was, yeah. He must have known. Yeah, it was amazing. Like, I didn't know. When I heard the full-time whistle, I was like, because I came on, I hadn't got the ball. I was kind of low, like, you're not getting on the ball. You're like, give me another few minutes. But yeah, it was an unbelievable game of hurling, and one that'll be, it probably doesn't get the coverage it gets because it was a draw, as you said, Joe,
Well, I'd forgotten, it's terrible, I'd forgotten a lot of it, and just reading this morning, even just what everybody was saying about the game, brought it back, people saying.
And the All-Ireland final then was on replay. It was a Saturday evening.
Saturday evening, yeah.
A month later. So it was a fierce long time, yeah.
Right. Amazing. Like, just one of the great rivalries in hurling. Like, it'd be hard to beat it. And that's not to mention 16 as well, where Tip get another one. But time is against us. What's going to happen the weekend, Owen?
Yeah, the bookies have it even money. I think rightly so. Look, and I suppose I'm not wearing my Tipperary hat here now, but I'd like to look at Tipperary all season, even from the off. Like, Tip went up to Salt in the first round of the league and they annihilated Galway. Okay, Galway didn't have X amount of personnel out. But Tipperary teams, you don't do that every season. Eddie will know about going to Salt Hill in a league game in January. It's like, and if you erase Cork from the season, so you can't do that. League final, first round of Munster Championship. Tipperary's results have been unbelievable. Their scoring rate has been nearly 130, 128, 223. I just find with Tipperary and feel looking on, like when the ball just is going into the forward line, you just feel they're going to score every time. And look, it's brilliant to see John McGrath back to his best. Like, I was even looking at it. There's 8, I suppose, of the Tipperary 20 that Liam Cahill has used over the last couple of games that have All-Ireland medals since 2019. So they have lovely experience of Croke Park. And then the young new kids on the block, like, we've seen them to be probably the best in the country, like winning minors a couple of seasons ago, under 20 this year. And there's an influx of 3 or 4 of them, not 6 or 7 of them. Oisin O'Donoghue comes off the bench. So I actually think Tipperary have a lovely mix. And so what's the thing here now is just the younger guys, how they'll adapt to Croke Park on All-Ireland semi-final day. Because I think Kilkenny have the know-how in Croke Park. We've seen that winning the last 6 Leinster finals there, being in an All-Ireland final or 2, running clear, beating them one year, last year close to him in the All-Ireland semi-final. So their experience, I suppose, on that big stage and that big arena is just probably a bit better than Tipperary's. But I think if Tipperary hit the ground running, which they have in a couple of matches, and get into their flow, I think if Kilkenny are chasing the game, what I mean by chasing it, 3 or 4 points behind, I think Kilkenny haven't proven themselves to be brilliant in the last 15 minutes or 20 minutes of games over the last season or 2. Now, saying that, Tipperary the last day could have conceded 3 or 4 goals, and I think no better team than Kilkenny with Owen Cody, TJ, these guys knocking around to clip those goals if those chances appear. So I'd probably just give Tipperary the nod, Joe. I just think momentum and the form they're in, and they're very, very quiet. There's not a word about them. Like, expectation is probably low, which is amazing. And here they are in an All-Ireland semi-final, and I just think they're going about their business very quietly. And again, I mentioned earlier on about Liam Sheedy back in 2007. Tipperary have the bank of hard work done since before Christmas, and you can actually see that how they're finishing games.
Jeez, that's very convincing.
Look, I said at the start it's 50-50.
I'm Eddie. I'm sold. I'm buying shares in Tipperary after that, Eddie.
Like, there has to be a winner. There has to be winners. So, like, would I be surprised if Kilkenny win? No, but I just like to look at Tipperary.
No, you make the case. And it's hard to know with Kilkenny, Eddie. Like, Leinster, it's so off Broadway, and then like Galway are so poor in that Leinster final, and you just don't know. Yeah. The same feel for them. You haven't seen them as much as Tip.
Yeah, look, I think all Owen's points are well made there, and they're right. Like, and I'd have looked at or Tip coming out of that league final, I felt they were in trouble. I felt, Jesus, they've had a real strong league campaign. It was a very disappointing way. And I'd say even themselves, they knew they were so much better than that. And then, look, obviously the Munster round robin game takes off in a life of its own. But I think when you go back and look at that match, what did Tipperary rescue from that match? They rescued a lot of pride from that match because they didn't throw in the towel that day. And for me, that was arguably, I reckon, was it 14 wides and they missed 2 good goal chances in the first half. So even having dealt with the sucker punch and go 12 down against Cork that day, I thought from a spirit and a collective point of view, if you're Liam Cahill, you took an awful lot more out of that match maybe than Cork did. So you carry that forward and you take it through with you. And I feel maybe now, where Tip sit, not being in that Munster final wasn't a bad thing either. Maybe they didn't need that Munster title yet. Maybe that's for further down the line. I'm sure they'd have loved it. I'm sure they would like that experience. But where they sit now, I think they're in a real good position. And I think if Tipperary were to be beaten on Sunday, I don't think Liam Cahill is going to get any heat over that. I think they've had a very strong year. So with that in mind, I think that makes them a very dangerous animal because they're now in an All-Ireland semi-final. An All-Ireland semi-final, all bets are off. You pin back the ears and you go for it because you have a huge reward and you want to get there. And I think Owen's point is also important. When Tip get in control of a game, they're able to manage a 5 or 6 point lead nicely. They're able to manage a game. So if there's pressure on one team, I think it's fair to say it's probably on our side of it because they have to go and get the job done. I think we have in the saga and the history, we have dipped considerably with Tipperary in recent years at all grades. So there's obviously the neighbourly dynamic at play as well. But this Kilkenny team, I think they need to deliver. Like they will, and I'd imagine Derek Ling will be very aware of that. I think the players themselves have surely spoken about this and what they want. And I think the concern is they haven't been stretched to the limit of where you'd like to be when you go into an All-Ireland semi-final. Dublin asked a lot of questions of us in the round robin, but I think that's, that level of performance, and I think Derek will draw on his experience there. The lads know how to spike hard at this time of the year, and this is it. Like, there's no, you can't die wonder now at All-Ireland semi-final stage. Like, so I'd imagine that the scars that these Kilkenny lads have over disappointments and heartbreaks over the last 7-8 years against all opposition and All-Ireland finals and against Tip, that should, for me, fuel this fire. And it's one that they should get done. And I think they will. But like Owen said there, I'm expecting a roller coaster. I'm not expecting it to be too easy to sit there as, wanting Kilkenny to win and enjoy this match. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they will bring the best out of each other. And I think where Kilkenny, need to probably get at it is they need their forwards pulling that Tipperary defensive unit apart early doors because as a collective they're very strong.
Okay, lads, do either of you think they'll be playing Dublin in a final?
Probably don't think Lightning is going to strike twice. No, Seamus Harvey is supposed to be out at the weekend, and he's a massive player from Cork, even from that physicality and that aggressive side of things. He really kicks that on. Dublin are a very systematic team, and their system it will ask questions of your forwards to work. And like if Cork are going back to field, that's not what you wanted either, because Dublin obviously football-esque, build from the back, work the ball up. We saw the last day they were able to have John Heatherton inside. Whether he starts or not, we don't know. But Dublin have a system that's very hard to break down. Like, they're very fit, and they got 7 points from midfield the last day between Brian Hayes and Conor Burke. So, like, Dublin kind of will feel last year against Cork in Semple Stadium that they hung into the game, but might not have had the belief that they could win,
or even went for it.
Oh yeah, or even went for it. Felt like they didn't go for it. Whereas now, what are we to lose? Let's go for it. We know how to win. We know how to beat a top team. And I think they have a very, very shrewd manager. And look, Cork are a month, I suppose, since they played and that. But look, it'll be interesting just to see. Usually when Cork get to Croke Park, they seem to enjoy it and they seem to always perform. Okay, they didn't win last year's All-Ireland final, but they still got a good performance, and we're lucky didn't come away with a replay maybe. So I probably still think Cork's. Yeah. I think Cork will get over the line on that one.
Yeah.
In exceptional circumstances from Dublin, But by God, the more I look at them, and I like said this to you, Joe, there a week or two ago, I didn't rate this Dublin team, but the more you look at them, they're really good. They have some really good performers there, and they won't be phased by Cork. I think they will stick to their plan and they'll push hard on it. And like I said there, I think they have actually three in that full back line that are capable of going toe to toe with that Cork full forward line. Okay. And I can't wait for that battle alone, because that's going to be very, very interesting, because they have quality man markers in those three guys.
Very good. Boys, brilliant. Thanks so much for doing that. Nice to have a little walk down memory lane. So, Eoin Kelly of Tipperary and Eddie Brennan of Kilkenny. Cheers, fellas. Appreciate it. Good talk to you.
Thanks, Joe.